One of the comments I get a lot on my videos is that modern architecture is just boring. So for this video, I'm going to show you a style of modern architecture which tried to be anything but. Postmodernism, or PoMo, is an architectural style which has produced some of Britain's weirdest buildings. But it's one that I've always had a bit of a soft spot for, and I want to show you why by taking you on a tour of London's best postmodern architecture. And I'll end by showing you my favourite London example of what I think might be UK architecture's most underrated style. Standing at the top of the London postmodern iceberg is No1 Poultry. It marks the corner where Poultry and Queen Victoria Street meet at Bank. From some angles, it looks like a ship gliding into the city. This distinctive clock and striped facade are characteristic of the postmodern philosophy, which promoted decoration, ornamentation, and bright colours. Postmodern architects were the first to ask, why can't buildings also be fun?
I think postmodernism is about freedom of expression. It's about bringing an emotional dimension into architecture.
Architects used the style as a playground, embracing fakery and taking inspiration from a wide range of architectural genres. Postmodernism created architecture with a strong and unique sense of place, and the Circle in Southwark is a good example of this.
It's good, it's nice, it's unique. My name is Hisham and this shop has been here for 27 years. It's unique because the architecture, there's only one circle in Tower Bridge and that's the one.
It's a housing estate with over 300 flats which was built in 1989, and this circus is created by 4 strikingly blue buildings. They reference the storage vessels and dyeing works which were prevalent in the area, and the buildings have also been compared to owls. In the middle of the circus is Jacob. He honours the dray horses who were stabled here in the 19th century. They delivered beer all over London, and this is where they slept. The area was previously known as Horsley Down, derived from horse lie down. Jacob was flown in by helicopter in 1987 to become centrepiece for the development. While at its heart the Circle is bold and colourful, it blends well into the surrounding industrial architecture. This bit along Queen Elizabeth Street is a postmodern take on Victorian architecture. Juxtaposition between old and new is a celebrated characteristic of postmodernism, and to talk more about that, we don't have to go far.
It's one of those buildings you kind of, you do a bit of a double take act. So what's that doing there? It's the overall sort of visual impact of it. It's waving, not drowning.
That's Andrew Wadsworth. He owned the development company which built this, China Wharf, which he named after his cat, China. While we were out filming the building, he noticed us and introduced himself.
It was described by Heritage England as the high watermark of British postmodernism. Well, because it's obviously a postmodern design. They're taking the Diocletian arches and putting it in a orangey pink facade next to a listed, very sort of workaday Victorian warehouse, and there's this kind of big smiling building in this amazing colour that you can see from Tower Bridge. So it's a landmark and iconic building of the style of postmodernism in the early 80s.
Completing in 1986, it created 17 new homes in a formerly derelict Victorian grain warehouse. It makes no apologies for being different and even extrudes out from its Victorian neighbours.
Looking not like a fake Victorian warehouse. We've got plenty of original ones, why do you need a fake?
But planners initially rejected the design.
The chief planner there was aghast at the design because he wanted it to blend in, and I wanted it to stand out.
So the planners referred the scheme to the Royal Fine Art Commission, who gave their approval on condition that the building be painted pink.
Make this building pink. Well, it's sort of orangey pink. So off it went, and we built it. Small details. The side of it curves in 2 directions. It's curving into the building, and it's also got a curved top to the archway, so it's an amazing bit of construction. And they did the most beautiful job in this extraordinarily complex brickwork, and similarly on the other side the brickwork is amazing.
Once it was built, the chief planner who had initially rejected the design even apologised to Andrew.
He wrote and said how marvellous it was, and he apologised for his earlier views and congratulated us on the building.
It was eventually listed in 2018 on its 30th birthday. But while postmodern architects celebrated juxtaposition, colour and vibrancy, they had a deep fascination with all different types of architecture, and experimented with Egyptian, Japanese, neoclassic and Art Deco motifs, something which was new and bold in the early 1980s. That's because for much of the 20th century, modernism had dominated architecture. It focused on design efficiency, clean lines and rectilinear forms. Modernism's philosophy was that architecture needed to be cleaner and more honest. Why can't an office building just look like an office building instead of dressing it up with decorations and ornamentation? In the post-war era, a lot of European cities needed to rebuild at scale, and the modernist style provided a solution. Its clean lines and lack of ornamentation made it cheaper and easier to build in large numbers. But modernism was also new and exciting. In an era of grey, soot-covered cities filled with rickety Victorian homes, these sleek, rigid monoliths felt futuristic. And in many cases they brought with them the promise of a nicer home and an upgrade in living standards. But straight away you had people criticising modernism.
Modernism sought anonymity and a sense of no place. It was the same everywhere.
Some argued that these buildings did little to improve their surroundings, and they were frustrated with how cities were losing their character and uniqueness.
Architecture has a 9,000-year history, and I don't think we can ignore it. I mean, it's too fabulous.
We planned our trip around London to film all these buildings, but we were surprised by how many PoMo buildings we just stumbled upon while walking between places. When you start looking, you find examples all over, particularly in the City and West End. That's because postmodern architects were comfortable designing modern interpretations of older architecture, and the style was called upon to create new buildings which could respond to historic context. Like this extension to the National Gallery in Trafalgar Square, which completed in 1991. Or the Royal Opera House Arcade in Covent Garden from 1999. While the sides and roofline make it clear that this is a modern building, it faces Covent Garden with this impressive stone colonnade with a shop-lined arcade. It manages to fit in so well that you'd easily think that this had been here a lot longer than 25 years. And you see buildings with this particular brand of postmodernism all over London. And like me, you may never have really noticed them before. These modern interpretations of classic features help them blend in with their surroundings. You'll see these columns, pillars and motifs, detailing which we don't usually associate with modern buildings. This mixing of traditional styles of architecture with modern requirements and constraints creates something that is easily identifiable as postmodern. PoMo's era coincided with the housing boom of the late 1980s and early 90s. And this domestic application of PoMo proved popular, because it reintroduced features of traditional residential architecture, with bay windows, mansard roofs, natural materials, arches and celebrated entrances. It felt homely and designed for humans. And at Swedish Quay, the window boxes, gridded windows, angled bays and flayed roof show how postmodern architects experimented with a range of architectural styles. One of postmodernism's most recognisable landmarks is Charing Cross Station, or rather Embankment Place, an office building built on top of the station. It completed in 1990 and has been compared to a jukebox or a cruise ship. The iconic arched form is best felt walking down the platforms at Charing Cross, where it sort of resembles an old Victorian train shed. This is a big building with a lot going on. I definitely see the cruise ship comparison with these curved bridge-like structures. I think they're coloured green as a reference to the roof on the Ministry of Defence, which is nearby. At ground level there's another arcade, and I really like these corners with their arches and columns which seem to reference Victorian railway architecture. Round the corner on Villiers Street it presents this space-age frontage, especially here at the entrance to the station, which is unlike anything I've ever seen in London. And this incredibly postmodern clock hangs proudly above the street. Back on the platforms, this Southern Railway emblem was retained from the original station. And I also love these ceiling lamps which seem to reference Art Deco. Postmodernism's take on Art Deco was a sight to behold, and I wish we'd seen more of it. For instance, this incredible canopy clearly references Art Deco. This might be the smallest postmodern building in London. It's set in a beautiful part of Notting Hill, which looked amazing on this November morning. As its characteristic turquoise tiles suggest, it was primarily built as a public toilet, but this florist was put alongside it to help pay for the toilet's maintenance. It now provides a focal point for the area. And I can't do a video about postmodernism in London without mentioning the SIS Building, the headquarters of the UK's Secret Service, or MI6. This is where postmodernism had to get a bit more serious. So there are no bright colours or even playfulness. It's a proudly formidable building, which is surrounded by this huge gate. They couldn't help but include a few postmodern motifs here though. And the building is crowned off with these turret-like structures which kind of watch over the city. And finally, I'm excited to show you my favourite London PoMo building. I really enjoyed making this video and learning more about an architectural style that I've always been pretty intrigued by. If you've enjoyed watching so far, please hit like and subscribe. If you're in the city and you're at Liverpool Street Station, you might have looked up and noticed this. 135 Bishopsgate, which I would say is my favourite example of postmodernism in London. It was finished in 1988, right towards the end of the PoMo era. Right after that, there was an economic slowdown which led to a decline in construction. By the early 2000s, things had recovered, but by then the architectural zeitgeist had changed. Buildings built in this era share some similarities with postmodernism, but they are distinctly identifiable as 2000s architecture. But back to 135 Bishopsgate. I think it's a really refined form of postmodernism which seems to take all of the things I like about the style and mash them into one building. So these circular towers, sort of like turrets, mark each corner of the building. They also have this really nice detail around the windows. And this is a 300-metre long building. If you turned it on its side, it would almost be as tall as the Shard. But the building is nicely divided into segments which help break up the mass. And the steps, planters and this impressive entrance provide a really active and diverse frontage at street level. The building has an interesting roofscape which rises towards a peak at the centre. And I love this glass arch which seems to be inspired by Victorian glasshouses, while the side peaks are more rounded, which creates a symmetry. So I hope you enjoyed this tour of my favourite London postmodernism. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.